So when was the train active?
When was the train active? The train, and that was what I was trying to look up, was to find a date when it was first activated. But in somewhere in the 1860s or 70s, the railroad was being built, and it was coming in from Kellerton, and it was to bypass Lamoni. Why, I don't know, but that's what the thought was. And some people from Lamoni went and visited with the railroad company, and a man by the name of S.V. Bailey was the main one who did this, and he prevailed upon them. They told him that they were going to go ahead with where they were at, and they said he came back with an offer that they couldn't refuse. In other words, people had promised to furnish the land and some monetary incentives to get the railroad to come through Lamoni. And this would have probably been in I would assume somewhere in the 1870s, but I'm not sure. S.V. Bailey was Dennis's great-great-grandfather and one of the people who had been important in the foundation of Lamoni. The railroad came in then and came into Lamoni and was active from then on. So and was active until there was still a train running. They call it the Pollywog. It came through here in the 70s. And that was about the end of the thing.
Yeah, my senior year, which was in 77, we still had trains coming through at that point.
But there was one train, and it came in once a week or something like that, and actually didn't do a lot of transporting.
What path within town, like what part did it go to?
You know where the city hall's at? That was the main place for the train. That was the, what do they call it?
The depot.
Depot, yes. That was the train depot. And the tracks came in just, do you know where the trail is, the bike trail, the walking trail just west of the high school? Well, that was where the train came in. There was a trestle there, and the train came in over that trestle, came down through town, past the depot, and out. A lot of it is where the bike trail's at. And then it picked up on the east side. East side is Smith Street, where the walking trail is at, or the bike trail. That is the old railroad right-of-way, went through. And it went to a switching area east of there called Togo. And that was where the train, they switched, and some of them went south, some of them went east. And during the war, that sounded too Japanese, and they changed the name to Giles, and it stayed Giles for a short period of time until after World War II, and then it went back to being called, it was the Togo Junction. But it came, if you'll watch for where the bike trail is, a lot of that is the old railroad right-of-way.
What happened to the old railroad tracks?
Okay, when they quit utilizing the train, they pulled the tracks and closed it, and the property went back to the people on each side. And so then it was fenced and continued to be a part of, in most places. And as I said, when we got ready to put through the bike trail, then a lot of it come on the railroad right away.
Okay, so you guys just paved over it?
Yes, and by that time, and part of it was the road bed was somewhat intact, but the tracks had been removed. The tracks were all gone by that time. And probably a better idea of how it was on the east end there on the bike trail, and because there was a big trestle down there. On the east side of, which is the main entrance coming in from the east on Graceland, east of there, down that railroad track, then the track had been closed, the rails were gone, and the people went in and paved it, and we rebuilt the trestle. They put a new floor on the trestle and then went over the top of it, and then went on out east. They did not go clear to Togo, but they went on near the Welcome Center.
This says, I was just doing some digging here, 1879 is when the railway came through.
What part of the train is by City Hall?
That was the caboose. That was an old caboose that was left here. It was rotted down in pretty bad shape. 3 years ago, we spearheaded a deal to refurbished the old caboose, and at that time it's covered with metal now. It was given to the city, and we went in, and Doris and a couple other people had a fundraising deal, raised some money, and we bought 10 and refurbished the old caboose. And it has another property that needs to be done to it, which is to put something that looks like windows in it, and the lumber's in my garage for doing the platform. You have some rotten boards on each end of it. So it was refurbished a few years ago to that extent, and there's some more to be done. And Jeff has talked to Vinci's. They're supposedly making something that will fasten on there that'll look like windows and complete the project. But we wanted to preserve the caboose, and that was why that was done.
Why'd you guys place it by City Hall?
Well, by City Hall, because City Hall was the depot. That's where the train tracks were. And it sits on train tracks, and those are old, original train tracks. That's why it's there. That was where the railroad went through.
In the downtown area, there was actually 2 sets of tracks there. It split off into 2 tracks and then came back together after you got through the downtown area on each side, because the tracks used to go on each side of the big grain towers down there, because trains would pick up grain, and once you got past the grain tower, it went back to a single track that went on out over the bike path, and then past City Hall, it was the same thing.
What was the reason for keeping that part of, or like the part of the train?
Oh, it was just history, and you'll see cabooses in several small towns. If you go around the country, several communities did that, and it was just for memory's sake and history.
And keep in mind, cabooses became expendable because at some point back in I think it was in the 70s, they stopped using cabooses and they just put an automated light on the end of the train, because the cabooses used to have people in them that would watch everything behind the train and could talk with the conductors. And
the caboose was also to haul passengers. They would load a load of cattle and go into Chicago with a load of cattle from here, and the people traveling with the cattle would ride in the caboose, and that was a train that was hauling cattle or something else, and it was a way of transportation. Also, when I was in school, the caboose out at Togo went south through Andover. Well, Andover, it went down, and just on the east side of Andover, the track went on south. And we had people that lived in that area. One person in my class in high school, then she used to ride the train in on Monday morning and stay in and live here in town and then go home on Friday evening. But she'd ride the train at that time. And so the train was actually, and the caboose was primarily for passengers.
Do you know how many people came through riding on the train through Lamoni?
No. Primarily in my memory, it was in 1943, Dr. C.C. Clark came from Kansas City. He and his wife and little boy came in here on the train and went to work for my great uncle, who was a veterinarian who had been injured, and Dr. Clark went to work for him. And they came in on the train, never having seen Lamoni before. And they came into Lamoni on the train. And so the train did handle passengers, but the amount of passenger traffic I have no idea about. But it hauled 30s and 40s. They used to haul a lot of coal, and the coal would be brought in on the train. They would park a railroad car on a siding. They had sidings, and out Cedar Street, there was a siding out on Cedar Street, and in the 40s, they used to bring cars of sand and rock and park them there. And then the college utilized those. They were doing some building at that time, and so railroad car would sit there until the college had people who came and unloaded it. I helped on that some, and you had so long to do it. I think it was probably 48 hours, and after that they paid what they called demurrage. If you didn't get the thing unloaded and so it could move on in 48 hours, then it cost money. So you got real busy, and but the same way with coal. A lot of coal came into Lamoni on the rails. There was a man here in town who had a team of horses and a wagon, and he hauled coal from the railroad cars and delivered all over town in the late 30s and early 40s. So it hauled grain out, hauled coal in, like I say, sand, rock, whatever, because truck traffic was a different situation at that time. And of course, that's what happened to the railroad. The interstates and trucks in many places caused the demise of the railroad. Although still in many places, if you go up to Osceola and sit there for a little while, then there'll be a train come through and it'll have 70 to 100 cars, and a good lot of them will be full of coal.
Did the train coming through Lamoni help establish Graceland?
I don't know that it had anything to do with it or not, but
I'm sure that at one point or another that people came to Graceland on the train. And I do know, like I say, the rail was important to bring things in for buildings and that type of thing. As far as when was Graceland established, 95?
Yes.
The railroad had already been here, so,
Oh, just kidding.
you know, it's like an interstate today. Lamoni has been able to do some things because of the interstate. And I'm sure that railroad had that same effect on Graceland and the community at that time. And that's why great-grandfather Bailey and the citizens that he worked with here wanted the train. It was important that it came through Lamoni.
it could make or break a town.
Okay. So having it come through was going to help make Lamoni?
Absolutely, because
Economically, it'd be huge.
you were able to bring, like I say, you were able to bring coal in. You were able to bring other things in. You were able to ship things out. The elevator, people would bring grain into the elevator, and then the grain, in those days, was shipped out on train. Now it's all goes out on trucks.
Is the train Lamoni's property, or is it owned by someone else?
This caboose was given to the city of Lamoni. In some respects, the outside is very much the same. And the area just west of the main building there, and it's covered and everything, they had a lot of carts in there, big hand carts that they pushed around to unload luggage or different items.